Hello and welcome to Precon Decon, the video series where I deconstruct the pre-constructed decks of Magic the Gathering's history. In this video, it's part 4 of looking at the Exodus pre-constructed decks, so we're going to look at the last one, which is called Widowmaker, which is a blue and black deck. So the theme of this deck is basically drawing and discarding. And it seems pretty good. Seems like a fun one to end on, so let's get into it. So, Decklist here, 17 creatures, 15 instants, 2 enchantments, an artifact, and 25 land. Mana curve off to the side there. Tops off at 5, as most of these decks do. Let's get into it. So, as I said, a big theme of this deck is kind of discarding cards for benefit. So there's a bunch of creatures that really benefit from that. So we have Mind Maggots, which is a 4 mana for a 2/2. When it comes in, you discard any number of creature cards. For every card you discard, it gets 2+1/+1 counters. Vampire Hounds is a 2/2 for 3. You can discard a creature card to give it +2/+2 until end of turn. Sky Shroud Vampire is exactly the same as Vampire Hounds, except it's a 3/3 flyer, and you discard a card and it gets +2/+2 on the return. So, a lot of cards here, depending on discarding creature cards. We have a Thalakos Scout, which is a 2/1 with Shadow. You can discard a card to put it back into your hand. Not sure. I mean, you might need to because it's essentially unblockable. And then one of the rares in the deck is Mindless Automaton. So 0/0 comes in with 2+1/+1 counters. You can pay 1, discard a card, put a counter on it, and you can remove 2 counters to draw a card from it. I think this has been reprinted a few times. I think it keeps getting downshifted in rarity because, like, I don't think it's. I think if you've got like a reliable way of like getting counters on it, then it can be pretty good. But yeah, it's a bit dirtly to work with. But you know, it fits in the theme of this deck here. Then we have a bunch of blue creatures, so we have 4 Merfolk Looters. Again, always nice when we get a pre-constructed deck that has a full playset of things. So this is all about drawing and discard. You tap, you draw, and you discard a card. Classic Merfolk Looter. Keeper of the Mind, who is a 1/2 for 2 blue. 1 blue and tap, draw a card, play this ability only if an opponent has 2 or more cards in hand than you do. Which they probably will do because you're going to be probably like drawing and discarding a lot. Rootwater Hunter, who is just basically identical to Prodigal Sorcerer, just 2 colors and a blue, tap to do 1 damage to a creature or player. So weird to think that blue used to have like this ability, like to tap to do indirect damage when it's so clearly a red ability, and it stuck with blue for like a really long time. Very weird. And then Manta Riders, 1 blue mana for a 1/1. 1 blue to get flying until end of turn. That's obviously kind of weak. These are probably going to be the things that you're going to be discarding to Vampire Hounds or Skyshroud Vampire or the Mind Maggots. So we have a bunch of removal spells as well. This is I wouldn't say it's copy pasted from like other black pre-constructed decks in this block, but you know, we've seen a lot of these so far. So we have Dark Banishing, which destroys non-black creatures that can't regenerate. 2 Diabolic Edicts to make target player sacrifice a creature. 2 Dark Rituals to power out some of these things a bit earlier, and 2 Necrologia, which is a pretty fun draw spell. You can only play it during your discard phase. But you pay X life to draw X cards, which is that's a very powerful effect. And 2 of those, which is really good. And as it's a blue Tempest block precon, we also have a load of Countermagic. So we have 2 counterspells, 2 mana leaks, 2 forbids. Forbid ties into this theme of like discarding cards. And then Capsize for bouncing permanents. We've seen all this before. There's not really much to say. Just a load of control options in removal and counter. Classic blue-black. And then we have a few sort of little extra, some spiciness here. So we have an Oath of Scholars. which is a three colors, one blue enchantment. During each player's upkeep, if that player has fewer cards in hand than an opponent, they can discard their hand and draw 3 cards. The Oracle text for this is really confusing. I was like, when I was getting the card images, because all these, so the oaths are a cycle. There's one for each color, and they all do a thing where, like, if during each player's turn, basically, if they're doing worse than someone else in regards to like some kind of resource, then they get, they get benefit. The most famous one I think is Oath of Druids. I think that's one that's had the most impact in like kind of older formats like Vintage. Oath of Scholars I don't know so much about. I'm not sure if this really saw any play. I think it's okay. Like, it works, I think, in this deck where, if you're potentially like discarding loads of cards to fuel your effects, you can just draw a fresh 3 at the start of every turn. I think it's quite good. Treasure Trove is just a great sort of like mana sink. It's a little expensive, but if you've got 4 mana, you're not doing anything else with it. Like if you're holding a handful of counter spells and they don't cast anything you want to counter, then end of turn, fine, draw a card. It's fine. And then Null Brooch. This is quite a spicy rare to include. So 4 mana for an artifact, 2 tap, discard your hand, counter a non-creature spell, which is strong. The interesting thing is that you can activate this ability even if you have no cards in hand. Because of the way it's worded, it says discard your hand. If you have no cards in hand, you still have a hand of 0, so it still counts as meeting the activation cost. So yeah, that's a really good rare to include in this, where you just have you essentially just have a counter spell sitting out there at all times, and yeah, it might cost your entire hand, but if you need to do it, then you can. So, I mean, I think it's like a pretty decently put together a pretty, oh god, I can't speak, a well put together deck. I think there's some things it could have benefited from. Death's Duet is a raised dead that gets creature cards from your graveyard back into your hand, which I think is really useful if you're discarding creatures to fuel effects. Keeper of the Dead is similar to the Keeper of the Mind. It gets oh no, it's not. It doesn't raise dead at all. It kills enemy creatures if you've got more creatures in your graveyard than they do, which again you will do if you're discarding stuff. Slaughter is just like Dark Banishing with buyback. It just would have been interesting to see that instead of Dark Banishing, like a few more cards from the Exodus set. Sift, I think, fits in really well because it's draw 3 and discard 1, so it's on theme. And then some alternative rares here. So Thalakos Drifters is a 3/3. You discard a card to get Shadow until end of turn. I mean, that's okay. Really, I was just kind of like really reaching for kind of extra rares that could have been that if we're on theme. Ephemeron is, I think, much better. It's a 4/4 flyer for 6. So you can discard a card, return it back to a hand. I think that fits in with the theme of discarding cards to pay for effects. And then Tortured Existence also fits in with the theme where you discard a creature card to get a creature card back to your hand. A lot of like so normally this what could have been section I usually leave to one slide, but this is a deck where I think it actually should have been in the previous set in Stronghold, because there's a lot more synergy in that set for like what this deck is trying to do, like with the draw and discard. Because like really, so these are all rares from Stronghold, which would have really fit in with this deck. So Ensnaring Bridge, creature with power greater than the number of cards in your hand can't attack. If you're discarding a load of cards, you can really do that to stop opponents attacking, which is that's really good. Revenant has power enough to use the number of creature cards in your graveyard. Again, if you're discarding a load of cards, Revenant can get really big. Volrath Stronghold gets creatures back from your graveyard back on top of your library, so you can draw them again and use them. And Volrath Shapeshifter becomes a copy of this is back when Graveyard Order mattered. It becomes a copy of the top card of your graveyard as long as it's a creature, and you can pay 2 and discard a card, so it becomes a copy of whatever you discard. So yeah, it's really weird that there was like these cards, which had I think a lot more synergy with the deck strategy, um, and weren't used. Like I do really think this deck should have been it should have been a Stronghold Precon to use some of these cards. But yeah, that's just me. I think it's like a pretty solid deck. It's I personally wouldn't have liked this deck. I think if I'd picked up when I was when I would have been 13, 14, I guess, playing this. Just because like discarding cards to me, like always, like I guess that's a test of player skill to know when to discard cards for like a better effect. I always get a bit iffy around like looting effects just because I want to play my cards, not discard them. But I don't know. Did you have this deck? Did you play it? I mean, did you play against it? What changes did you make to it? I think it's pretty good on paper, but I mean, I don't know how it played. So I'd really like to hear from you if you had this deck and played it. Stick a comment below, and I'll be back next time. So we're done with Exodus now. So now I'm going to be moving on to Urza's block and looking at the pre-constructed decks from that. So next time, thanks for listening. Have a good day.